G'day guys, and welcome back to another episode. So early season snapper is upon us, and today I'm making a video addressing both kayak fishing and boat fishing, as well as land-based fishing for early season snapper, to help those out there who might be wanting to learn a little bit more to help increase their chances of catching an early season fish. Now, I'm not a pro by any means. I don't fancy myself as a great snapper fisherman, but over the last 13 years of living here in Victoria, I've learned a fair bit about them, and I feel like I might have some information that might be of use for some people out there. Okay, so as far as the early season, in my opinion, it sort of starts around sort of mid to late September, sort of right around the start of October, and it runs through to around the end of October, start of November, which is all this is largely dependent on what the water temperatures in the bay are. So early in the season, obviously with the water temperatures a bit lower, the fish, I find they tend to be in a bit shallower. Now, there are quite a number of theories as to why that is the case. Some people theorize that the water out deep in around the bottom is a little bit too cold and it's a little bit warmer in the shallows, which the snapper might prefer. Now, over my years of fishing for snapper, I've noticed a bit of a pattern. So early in the season, I catch more on plastics. Midway through the season, I get them on both plastics and bait. And then towards the end of the season, mostly on dead bait. Now, what my theory behind that is that early in the season, the fish are in shallow trying to feed on live bait fish and live prey. The reason for that is so they can get the high fat and the oil content from live prey to help fatten themselves up a bit for the spawn. During the spawn, they get a little bit more opportunistic, so they'll take anything that they come across. And then after the spawn, they're probably feeling a little bit exhausted. And instead of really going after live prey items, they're just happy to graze on whatever they can out there. All right, so we're going to be getting into land-based fishing first. Now, as far as spots go, what I recommend looking for is somewhere with either a long jetty or a rock wall, something that's going to get you off the beach and off the shoreline and out into a little bit deeper water. Now, the other reason why you want to find some kind of structure like this is bait fish will quite often be hiding in amongst the rocks and around the pylons on the jetty. So it serves two purposes there. So it's structured to attract bait fish, which in my opinion, those early season snapper are going to be feeding on, as well as to get you out there onto the water a bit further. Now, what I'd recommend as well is that you check the weather when you're on your way down and then have a look on Google Maps to see which way the pier is orientated. What you want to do is you want to find a spot where you're going to have the wind coming from behind you, so that when you cast, you can get a nice long cast out into the bay or out into wherever you're trying to cast to, and that way you're going to cover as much territory as possible. No point casting in the wind and only flicking your plastic only 5 to 10 meters in front of you. You want that wind coming from over your shoulder. Now, as far as my choice of soft plastic to use when fishing off those rock walls and off of the jetties, because you've got the bait fish around, you want to imitate them with your soft plastic. So things like your paddle tails from Munros in the 3.75 inch, even the 2.75 inch are going to work. Z-Man Slim Swims, the diesel minnows, anything that's going to look like a small bait fish is going to be a great plastic to be thrown around those land-based areas. Now, as far as the color goes, motor oil's a good one. So anything with like a green tinge, a gold tinge to it, even white, they're going to quite well represent the bait fish that are there. Now, if you do see bait fish swimming around, try and swim your soft plastic through the bait. If they don't spook or they try to gather up with your soft plastic, you know you're matching the hatch really well and that you should get a bite if there's any snapper around. All right, so now we're going to move on to kayak and boat fishing for snapper in the early season. Now, as far as spots go, there are so many good spots that are available to people who can get out there. So anywhere from Port Arlington all the way through Corio Bay and the Geelong waterfront, Avalon, Werribee South, Point Cook, Campbell's, Altona, Williamstown, Ricketts, Princes Pier, like everywhere around the edges of the bay are going to have snapper early in the season. So as far as spots go, look, for me personally, I pick spots that are nice and close to home so I don't have to wake up too early to get out there. But there are so many good places that you can take your kayak or your boat to fish for those early season snapper. Now, as far as the bottom that you want to have when you pick a spot, you want to pick a spot that's got a little bit of a reefy bottom, because the snapper obviously going to be trying to find that live food in amongst structures. So you're basically taking the same sort of philosophy as land-based, where you've got the jetty or the rock wall attracting bait fish, and you're applying that out in places where you obviously might not have a jetty or a rock wall there. So anywhere with patches of reef is going to be a great place to fish. Now, here's one little hot little tip. Often places where you get whiting are going to have snapper there early in the season because of that reefy sort of bottom. But what you want to avoid is you want to avoid areas with super gin clear water. You want to have a little bit of murkiness, because if it's really, really clear in that shallow water, it can make the snapper a little bit spooky and not want to take your plastic. So definitely find a place where it's got nice patchy reef, a whiting ground even, but you don't want clear water. You want a little bit murky, and you should be able to find snapper in there. Now, as far as my soft plastic of choice, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that my favorite plastic is the Berkley Gulp 7-inch turtleback worm. Now, I've got a couple of colors here, pumpkin seed and camo. They'll both work. Pumpkin seed has caught some good fish for me before, but honestly, the camo is my absolute favorite. Last season, I caught probably 50 snapper off the kayak and in the boat on plastic, and out of the 50, probably 45 of them came on the camo, and I was trying other colors and patterns as well. I might have got a couple on the pumpkin seed, but yeah, the camo has definitely done the damage. So guys, I don't want to cause an extinction of these at the tackle shops around Melbourne, but if you can, grab a few packs, throw them in your tackle box, because these are absolutely dynamite on the snapper in the shallows. The reason I think they're so good is because I think in those sort of whiting areas and those reefy areas in the shallows, you get the polykite worms in there, and these are probably quite a good match for those polykite worms. Now, the other soft plastic that I caught quite a few fish on last year, maybe 3 or 4 or something like that, on the boat largely, but I know that Steve from Excellent Fishing had great success with these as well, is the Berkley Gulp Nemesis 5-inch in nuclear chicken. Now, nuclear chicken has always been a favorite color for a lot of snapper fishermen out there. But yeah, these are definitely worth a try as well. So make sure you got a pack or 2 of these in your tackle box as well. Now, a couple of tips here as well for when fishing on a boat or on a kayak is you want to have obviously the rod that you got flicking around, but out the back of the boat on the drift, and try to drift, don't anchor, because I've found last year that anyone who anchored didn't catch any fish at all. Us guys who were drifting got most of the fish. Have one in the rod holder there, just being dead stick. So what I do is I'll put it in the holder, open up the bail arm, let it drop. The moment it stops dropping, I'll clip the bail arm over and give it a wind, and that'll get it just off the bottom so it doesn't snag, but it's close enough to the bottom that the snapper are going to find it. Yep. On the sleeper. Slammed it. Yeah, turtleback, yep. Beautiful snapper that. Probably getting up around that sort of mid-60s to 70 mark. So you definitely want one on the dead stick. I think more than half of the fish I caught last year came on that dead stick soft plastic. So definitely make sure you got one out there on the drift. Now, as far as weather conditions go, especially for the kayak here, I prefer a westerly wind, northwest to westerly sort of thing. Obviously, the reason being that where I fish in the bay, the wind's basically coming straight off the land when it's coming from those directions, so it doesn't chop up the bay too much. Now, as far as the speed goes, anywhere from 8 to 11 kilometers per hour, and that is a butter zone. So anything over 11, it can get a little bit choppy for the kayak. Obviously, if you're in the boat, it's probably not going to bother you too much. But anything above 11 will get too choppy, but anything below 8, it's going to get too calm. It's going to glass out. It's going to spook the fish a little bit too much, and they're not going to bite as aggressively. All right, guys, so now we are on to gear selection. So we're going to start with land-based, and then we're going to move over to like boat and kayak, and we'll talk about what I use. So land-based, I'll be using something that's typically like this. Now, this is a 7-foot Shimano Zodius heavy, so it's 7 to 14 pounds, so I'd rate about 3 to 7 kilos. And I've got a Shimano Twin Power 3000 XD, loaded with PE 1.0 braid, and I've got 16 pound fluorocarbon leader. So quite a stiff rod, it casts a long way, and it'll really punch that hook into the snapper's mouth when they grab the plastics. I wouldn't probably use anything less than a 3 to 6 land-based. 4 to 8's probably better. And 7'6", having that little bit of extra length can help as well to keep the fish out of the rocks when they're close. So something like this is my sort of optimum land-based flicking rod and reel. Again, if you've been watching the channel for a long time, you'll know that I caught a 1.05 meter mulloway on this outfit. So it is more than capable of handling a big snapper land-based. All right, so now we're going to talk about kayak or on the boat. Now, being on a kayak or a boat, you obviously don't have the major obstructions that you're going to have land-based, things like, you know, your rock walls, your pylons, your jetties, cardinal markers and channels, things like that. So you can get away with fishing a little bit lighter than you typically would land-based. So what I've got here is one of my kayak outfits. So it is a Shimano Poison Adrena, 3 to 6 kilo, and I've got a Stella 2500 on there. Now, guys, I do love my high-end gear, but you don't need to spend all this money. You can get it something like a 2500 Nasky, even a Sienna with a Shimano Raider rod. Probably 2 to 5 would be the minimum that I'd use on the kayak, as you need that little bit of sort of stiffness to be able to punch the hook in. 3 to 6 I find is perfect for the kayak. You're going to be able to flick small plastics with it. 7-inch turtleback worms, you're going to flick it with it perfectly fine as well. It's got enough sort of meat in it there to punch the hook into the fish's mouth, and you can handle a quite large fish on it. So definitely what I'd consider an ideal rod and reel for the boat or the kayak. Now, as far as the braid that I've got on those reels, I use a PE 1.0 for both land-based and for the kayak. That's just my personal preference. Some people might want to fish lighter with like a PE 0.8. Some people might want to fish heavier so they don't risk losing a fish. So they might go to PE 1.2, 1.5. I find PE 1 is a pretty good sort of thickness and strength for fishing for snapper. Now, I'm not going to get into the PE debate here, but I don't usually go by pound with braid. I go by PE rating, as to me that's a better indicator of what that braid is capable of. Now, jig heads. This is something that is actually a lot of people sort of gloss over, but something that I sort of find to be really, really important. Now, the reason being is snapper, if you've seen their mouths, they've got sort of blunt, crushing teeth, and they've also got some quite sharp teeth as well. So you need to be using really tough jig heads. Now, with things like your Munro's paddle tail, you know, I'd probably use maybe a 2 to 3.0 size jig head. With the Z-Man Slim Swims, I'd use a 1.0. With the turtleback worms and the Nemesis, anywhere from a 3.0 to a 5.0. Now, as far as the weights go, land-based, I'll use between 1/6 of an ounce and a 1/4 ounce, which is probably a bit heavier than I'd use on a kayak. The reason being is I want to get that long cast to cover as much distance as I can, so I'll use a little bit heavier. On the kayak, sort of in that 4 to 5 meter area I typically fish, I use 1/6 of an ounce on the dead stick rod to get it down, and then I use a 1/8 of an ounce rod in my hands because I'm flicking it out in front of me and it doesn't have any sort of like pull on it from the drift, and it can get down there quite easily. Now, as far as brands go, TT Lures headlocks are quite good. I recommend getting the heavy duty hooks for snapper as well, so because, you know, their mouths are so tough they'll just bend the hook and crush it. So you definitely want a heavy duty hook, but as far as I'm concerned, the absolute best jig head are these. It is the Berkley Nitro Saltwater Pro. Now, they've got the Estuary Pro and the Saltwater Pro, and the easy way to tell them apart is the Estuary Pro has a black nickel hook. The Saltwater Pro is like a grey or a silver hook. These are absolutely bulletproof. I've caught so many snapper on each one of these that I've got in my garage, in my my Hall of Fame. The jig head there has got teeth marks all over them. Not this one in particular, but the ones I got out in my garage, they've got teeth marks all over them. Still sharp, never look like they're going to be straightened, never rolled the hook point or anything like that. These things are bulletproof, so definitely recommend the Berkley Saltwater Pro jig heads for chasing snapper. Now, a few other general tips here. Now, as far as time of day goes, I've always done pretty good early in the morning. However, having said that, especially land-based, I've caught them all times of day: early morning, late morning, lunchtime, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, nighttime. Caught them all times of day. Now, the thing you kind of want to look for when you're land-based fishing is your tide changes. The best way to think of a tide change is imagine you're up in the high country and you say you're hunting deer. It's blowing an absolute gale, but you know that later in the day, you've probably got about a 2-hour window where that wind's going to back off. It's going to be easier to walk around and then go out there and hunt. It's exactly the same for snapper. The tidal flow is like wind. So when you get to those tide change times where you've got the slack water, it's easier for them to go out and swim through the water and hunt down their hunt down their prey. So they're not going to expend as much energy trying to hunt down their food as they would trying to eat mid-tide. So early morning, sort of late afternoon, night time, and tide changes generally are the best time to be hunting down a snapper. Now, obviously, having a fish finder, sonar, sounder, whatever you want to call it, is a good thing to have to be able to hunt, to locate the schools of snapper. Now, one thing I will say is if you're on a boat, those are the things like your Simrads with the 1 kilowatt transducer, they are overkill. You're going to pick up everything in the water column and you're going to have a hard time trying to discern what's what down there. So I've got a Garmin 5CV, which I believe has got a 600 watt transducer. And I find that is absolutely perfect for marking up the snapper in 4 to 5 meters. It's crystal clear when you see them on the screen, especially when you use the dual frequency. And if you've been following my channel, you might have seen the video where I did about sounder setup. If you haven't, it's right there, so make sure you go and check it out. Now, as far as moon phases go, I'm not too picky, but one time that I won't fish is around the full moon. Every time I've tried for snapper on the full moon, I've never caught anything. So I wait for maybe 2 to 3 days, or if it comes up to 2 to 3 days before, I won't fish in that window, and 2 to 3 days after, I won't fish. But anything outside of that, definitely a good time to be chasing snapper. All right, now this is a bit of a $1 million question. Early in the season, would I pick fishing from a boat, or would I pick fishing from a kayak for snapper? In the shallows, I've got to say my pick is the kayak. Now, it's not just because I love kayak fishing, but last season, we noticed people who were fishing in boats. Now, we had some people who were anchoring near us in big boats. They weren't catching anything. But there were guys coming over in small tinnies, and they were doing exactly what we were doing, and they weren't catching any fish. Yet us guys in the kayaks were absolutely smashing them. So I think that the fish can be, again, a little bit spooky in the shallow water. And when you've got a big hull going overhead, it must sort of put them off a little bit. Whereas the much smaller kayak, it's got obviously a much smaller sort of profile on the water. Doesn't seem to spook the snapper as much. I put my camera down during snapper season, early in the season, and got a video of a whole bunch of schools of fish. So obviously the kayak doesn't seem to bother them as much. So yeah, kayak is definitely my pick. If you had to pick between either kayak or boat early season, kayak is definitely the way to go. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Now, I've got a playlist on my channel which has got heaps and heaps of snapper fishing. So if you want to check out some of the action on the kayak from last year, I definitely recommend having a look at that. Got great videos there with sounder setup. I've got videos there with snapper schools underwater. My fishing rod getting ripped in by a snapper on a hot bite as well. So definitely worth checking out. Now, if you've got any questions, chuck it in the comments down below. Obviously, I'd be more than happy to help you out. Flick us a like if you haven't already and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.